Donald Trump always has an answer.
Well, you had a situation, it was both. I said both, I do both. Let me just tell you something.
Over the past 4 years, we've gotten the impression that this man has not once paused for a moment to think about anything. I was struck by this fact recently when Kanye West gave a series of interviews. He was running for president in 2020, or walking, as he said. When asked a question to which he didn't have a ready answer, he stopped to think, or even pray, and there was silence. Confronting this silence, Jimmy Kimmel nervously cut to commercial.
Why don't we take a break? We'll come back.
And his pause on Joe Rogan made him the laughingstock of Twitter.
How do you think you will approach that? I mean, you will be the commander-in-chief of the greatest army the world has ever known. If you're in that position and we have to deal with some sort of a military action with China, what if China takes over Taiwan? What if they invade Taiwan?
This is in stark contrast to Trump and Biden on the campaign trail, who always had an answer for everything, immediately.
Excuse me,
Hey, let me just say to you.
No. I'm Mr. President.
But what does this say about us? That we would rather have a president who spouts off the first thing that comes to their head than one who would actually stop and think for a moment. The activists today tell us that silence is violence. Donald Trump would wholeheartedly agree. But they're wrong. Silence is actually a virtue. We might classify it with the intellectual virtues, like open-mindedness and intellectual humility, the virtues that help us reason better, think better, act more wisely in the world. Silence is a pause, an inwardness, a bulwark against the ceaseless noise of the world. Silence is an opportunity for us to learn about ourselves in relation to the rest of the world, to take stock of the information that we have, to explore connections between things. Silence makes space for our conscience to speak, and indeed our conscience can only speak through silence. But as we're seeing, silence is tremendously undervalued in our world. We can certainly understand why. Silence is difficult. Listening to that little voice inside of us is difficult. Heck, listening to anybody is difficult, especially when we're accustomed, as we are today, to noise, even addicted to notifications and constant streams of informational input, the ability to click away if we're even the slightest bit bored. In fact, research in psychology has shown that people would rather administer electric shocks to themselves than sit in a room alone. I've been studying the life of Nelson Mandela recently. He was the famed leader of South Africa, the first black president, a key figure in ending apartheid, and he was a political prisoner for almost 3 decades. During a speech in 2000, he said, "If 27 years in prison have done anything to us, it was to use the silence of solitude to make us understand how precious words are and how real speech is in its impact on the way people live and die." The fact is, without an appreciation for silence, without gifting ourselves with the space that silence brings, without cultivating the virtue of silence, we can never understand how precious words are. Talk is cheap, as the saying goes. Words are thrown around today like nothing. Maybe you've even checked Twitter or sent a text while watching this video. And while it may seem inconsequential on an individual level, I think the effects compound across the population and over time. We're becoming worse listeners. I think our inattention to silence, our undermining of silence, is at the root of many of the issues we see today. But this is not a new observation. Back in the 17th century, the philosopher and mathematician Blaise Pascal wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. So how can you bring a little more silence into your life? Well, there's a lot of great ideas out there, and they're not going to be new to you. It's just a matter of putting them into practice. Going outside for a walk every now and then without your phone. Trying your hand at painting or drawing. Anything creative. Starting journaling even. Maybe even visit a church or a temple. As our society becomes more secular, I think we're overlooking the value that these traditional places of worship can bring. If they don't give us value for the metaphysical teachings that we no longer really believe in, well, at least they can still give us value for the way they steward silence, the way that they help us cultivate silence. We seem to be living in an age of universal deafness and lack of understanding, to quote the writer Milan Kundera. But we can do something about it. It starts with silence.